All right, folks, the Forestry Department has recorded several forest fires, bushfires, I'm told, since the start of this year. And these fires have caused severe damage to forest reserves, which will take months or years to recover. The Senior Director of Zonal Operations, Eastern, at the Forestry Department, Mr. Damart Williams, is with us now. Morning, sir. Welcome to Smile. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Concern more than previous years, or it heavier since the start of the year, or this is what happens normally?
Well, it's somewhat typical to have forest fires at this time of the year.
Yep.
And one of the dry seasons is between December to March, and the other one is from July to August. However, this year is somewhat different from others in the sense that we have had an increase that we have recognized since the beginning of this year. I think 2015 was the year that actually is reminiscent of what happened during that period of time. We had a significant number of fires during that year, 2015. I think it was an inflection point for the Forestry Department in the sense that since that time we decided to have a number of sensitization sessions and community engagement with persons who are living within or just outside of the forest reserves. So 2023 is somewhat reminiscent of 2015, but the agency has done quite a lot since the past few years to ensure that we have a reduction in the number of forest fires.
Give me some numbers, Damart. I mean, typically, on average, how many bushfires would we be looking at this time of year? And for 2023, what's the figure now? Well,
for 2023, we have had no less than 8 major forest fires.
Wow.
Typically, we would have perhaps about 6 or 7 for the year, but it's just
the entire year.
For this time of the year.
Okay.
But if you're looking at the entire year, we're looking at about 20 for the year. We have had in specific areas through the course of the year, which are considered to be fire-prone areas, especially in the eastern end of the island, looking at places like Spring Penny, St. Thomas, Clarendon, Northern Clarendon, Bullhead. Bullhead is really the area that we had the most recent major fire within the eastern area.
Okay.
Approximately 40 hectares of land in Bullhead damaged.
Set fires, and when I say set, I don't mean set deliberately, but because of incompetence, or maybe not incompetence. What's the word I want?
Negligence.
Yeah, carelessness. Is that what's happening, or is this a climate change thing and the place just dry, that if a man cough, fire start?
I think it's a confluence of both. Let me explain. First of all, I think fires in Jamaica is actually a social and cultural phenomenon because Jamaicans have this mindset that in order for them to clear lands for planting, they have to burn the lands. Exactly. And that coupled with the fact that we're having longer dry periods now, and the fact that there's, the time is very windy as well, and there's a high volume of fuel on the ground as well. So all these things come together to create the perfect storm, so to speak. And that's why we have so many forest fires during this time of the year. But climate change does play a part as well. As I said, you do have longer periods of dry spells, and the time is extremely hotter. And the fact is that there are also more fuel as well that we have. For example, leaves falling from trees. As I said, persons are actually out there lighting a lot of fires adjacent to the forest reserves.
Yeah, I'm watching now and I'm thinking, oh, well, which part may live no fire now, give me no problem. Why should it be a concern of every Jamaican, this issue of forest fires and bushfires in Jamaica? Well,
I go back to 2015. In 2015, we had significant losses in terms of property and as well as potential revenue for the agency. So Jamaicans should be concerned the fact that at the end of the day, they themselves can be affected by these fires. It's somewhat ironic because persons who light fires adjacent to forest reserves are the ones in most cases who are actually affected most adversely by these fires. As again in 2015, millions of dollars were lost by farmers who are farming within the confines of the forest reserves and also beside the forest reserves.
Wow.
Right. So persons, especially those living close to forest reserves, are the ones who have are the most to lose whenever there's a forest fire.
That's what you mean what's what you meant when you said revenue?
Yes.
So it's not about the
But for Forestry Department as well.
So how you lose money if there's a fire?
Right. We have, as a part of our main mandate is to reforest areas, to plant trees, for both conservation and for revenue generation, for plantation management.
Right, so you can sell the trees.
Exactly,
right.
exactly. So once we have reforestation take place and we have our young plantations, when we have fires, there's in most cases a total destruction of those plants that we have planted. So what you have is that if you're looking at 20, 30 years down the line, the expected revenue from that is totally lost.
You said a lot has been done, particularly since 2015, to mitigate against things like this, to reduce instances. What are some of those things that the Forestry Department has done?
Well, the agency recognizes that a nuanced approach is required to address this phenomenon. Not least of which is the fact that we have to work with various stakeholders who are critical to our partnerships. For example, as I mentioned earlier, persons living adjacent to forest reserves. These are the persons who will recognize that we have to go to directly. So one of the things that we did since 2015 was to increase our community interactions. So we have had a number of forest fire management training sessions with these individuals, trying to build their capacity to both to prevent and to suppress forest fires. We have also worked quite closely with the Jamaica Fire Brigade. Obviously, they are the ones who have the main mandate to manage fires generally in Jamaica. Unfortunately, one of the issues that we have had, as you can imagine, going into a forest reserve, we don't have roads like you have here in Hertfordshire or Crossroads. So what you find is that there's a significant challenge in getting the fire truck to these areas. So that's a limitation of ours. And it goes back again now to us actually working with community members, because these are the persons who we expect to not necessarily go in to fight a fire, large blaze, but to at least to practice the principles of suppression whenever a fire actually starts, a small fire starts, to prevent it from spreading to a forest reserve.
How many forests do we have?
We have over 100 forest reserves right through the island. Right.
Wow.
Quite a lot. But as I said, though, in terms of forest fires, what you find is that they are typically in the more fire-prone areas. And not all forest fires, not all forest reserves will experience forest fires in. As I said, Northern Clarendon is one such area. St. Thomas is another area. Sections of obviously Kingston and St. Andrew. So those are the areas that we're more focused on.
You already said you would lose money because they're going to burn the plants. How long that would take you to bring them back up and start again type of thing?
Well,
it depends on the kind of fire, right?
It depends on the kind of fire. It also depends on the species that we plant. We do have some species which are more fire resistant. But the majority of the species that we plant actually do not do well with fire. So we have to actually go back into these areas and replant. Of course, it takes time, it takes money, especially if you have, for example, a plantation which is 3, 4, 5 years old. You have lost those 5 years, you have to start again, and hoping that the measures that we put in place are in fact successful. Another measure that we normally put in place is what we call fire lines. So these are what we place close to the areas that we have planted or in the boundaries of our forest reserves. We clear the fuel to reduce the likelihood of the fire spreading onto the forest reserves.
All right.
Thanks for coming, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Stay safe. Look after yourself and your family. Stay with us for a minute. Senior Director of Zonal Operations, Eastern, at the Forestry Department, Mr. Damart Williams.
All right. Coming up, the future of e-mobility in Jamaica.
Yep. Garticus will finally do some work.
All on the sun. Oh no, we're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue, and then we'll take it higher. Oh, we're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue, and then we'll take it higher.